Hi, my name is Connie Nelson. I'm Partner Emeritus with the Public Strategies Group, and I'd like to give you a flavor for what Catapult Design Lab experiences can be like this summer. A Design Lab experience almost always involves examining the written, the stated and unstated assumptions that lie underneath the problem or system that's brought to the lab. And it's often the case that those assumptions were maybe known at one point in time, but through the years they either have gotten forgotten or have not been re-examined lately. And we try to name the assumptions that underlie it and see if they could be absolutely flipped on their heads. Let me give you an example of flipping an assumption on its head. So one of our clients was the New York State Property Tax Office, and the challenge they gave us was, how can we create equity, property tax equity across the state of New York, defining that by people with similar valued properties would pay the same amount of property tax, which was not the case at the time. And we did do a design, and its implementation was stymied because one of the pushbacks was it's simply too expensive to go to the new system that was envisioned. That assumption was underneath every meeting. That assumption was under the logjam in terms of moving this forward. So we did another design lab experience around that and flipped the question. The new assumption was, well, what's the cost of continued inequity? And when someone actually took a piece of paper and a pencil and decided the cost of tax court appeals, of reassessments, and all the other aspects of continued inequity, the cost was much higher. So by flipping that assumption and looking at it with a new lens, it broke the logjam on property tax equity. Let's go a little bit further into what a lab experience might be like for you. We also have, as managers and supervisors, pretty strong analytical tendencies. So we like to say that we get ideas, we judge ideas, we kill ideas, all within about 3 seconds. That's very different from a lab experience. In the lab experience, we defer judgment and we try to create lots of ideas, lots of non-traditional ideas, and hitchhike on each other's thoughts. And it often involves playing longer with an idea than normally comfortable, but it does lead to results. The example I sometimes give is a town that was in the Netherlands that had a littering problem. And there was just littering all over the park, and the managers got together and said, oh, we've just got to hire more park workers to pick up the litter. And the CFO said, oh, we don't have money for park workers, we can't hire any more people. So they were brainstorming and they came up with the idea of, well, then we're just going to have to pay people to pick up their litter. And the CFO again shook his head and said, we can't pay people to pick up their own litter, that we still don't have the money for that. But by hitchhiking on ideas, by continuing to play with that idea, they did come up with something that they ultimately used, which was a joke-telling trash can. They paid people, but in non-monetary means. So every time a person picks up a piece of trash in that park and throws it in the trash can, they get told a joke, and they do not have a littering problem. So that's an example of playing with ideas without judging them for a little bit longer than normally is done. Another example from a client is Minnesota Child Support Enforcement. The challenge that was brought to the lab experience was, how can we increase compliance with child support obligations by the non-custodial parent? And one of the assumptions that was in our way was an assumption that came into the lab that the problem was deadbeat dads, and we just really had to work on deadbeat dads. Instead, we flipped that assumption on its head and asked, what stands in the way of people paying? And the result that came out was the first model in the nation that talked about situational compliance, similar to situational leadership that we're all familiar with. But situational compliance is which parents are willing and able to pay, and how do we get the system out of their way? Which parents are willing but unable, and how do we connect them to resources? Which parents are able but unwilling, and how do we use enforcement at that time? And using the differing reasons why people do and do not pay, the system response was different. Our client says to this day that that changed the national conversation on child support enforcement. So hope to see you this summer. Together we can search for possibilities inside a design challenge that you give us, inside new strategies you'd like to see developed, or inside a problem that you would like some problem solving for a problem you're facing. Can't wait to see you there.